You're practicing, in a sense, you're practicing non-duality. As I said before, that, if you are understanding the true purpose of doing meditation as it relates to self-realization and as it relates to experiencing the truth, which is non-dual, well, then you're practicing non-duality. So what you just described is that, because in the normal course of events, we automatically identify with thoughts. We automatically experience me thinking thoughts. So here, now we're sitting here being present to thoughts, being aware of them arising, being aware of them passing, being aware of all that is occurring is an appearance. And now in this practice of meditation, what's happening includes you, includes the person is now part of what's happening, instead of the person is the subject perceiving what's happening. The person is part of what's happening, because in non-duality, what's happening is all there is. So in meditation, that's actually what the practice is. We're practicing simply being present, and the presence is an awareness of what's happening. And there is nothing outside of it. Even the awareness of what's happening is part of what's happening, So it's non-dual. And this is the idea is that at some point through this practice and through understanding what's happening, as I was mentioning to you before, that there comes a time when the understanding helps you to see, for example, that it's not that awareness split itself. This is an important thing to understand. It's not that awareness split itself and became separated from itself in order for you to be located as a separate finite reality. If that were the case, then awareness would not be infinite anymore, because if there is another separate reality, it can't possibly be infinite, right? So it never actually separates itself. It produces an appearance of separation. This is important because it points out that non-duality is always true. Duality was never actually true. Duality only is an appearance, right? Because if awareness were to actually separate itself, then it would no longer be itself. It would be finite, just like, because once there's two, it can't be infinite, right? And so it never actually separates itself. And that's one of the reasons that at a certain point in these understandings and these practices, that it's valuable to start to tune into non-duality, right? So that you can begin to see that as in the case of the example that Rupert Spira uses with John Smith and King Lear, that's a very good metaphor to really review, right? Because the one thing about that metaphor that is really useful to understand, and that metaphor helps to make it clear, is that John Smith was never King Lear. Even when he believed he was King Lear, even when he behaved as if he was King Lear, he was not King Lear. He was never King Lear. It was an appearance of being King Lear to John Smith. And in the same way, for us, see, the thing about the idea of being King Lear, as that translates into the way our lives are, is that most of humanity is King Lear. Most of humanity is acting out the roles that they're in. So the idea of being King Lear has a lot more credibility for us than it would be for a guy who was acting as King Lear in a play. Has a lot more credibility for us because the stage in the theater is the world. The stage in the theater is the world, and the rest of the actors is all of humanity. And the rest of the actors as all of humanity is almost all of humanity. It's hard to put a number on that, but I think it would be safe to say that we're talking about 99 point something %, because the number of people, unfortunately, who are even exposed to these things that we speak about here is one small number, and then inside that number is the number of people who actually it takes that they actually get it and they actually understand the relevance and the importance of it and the implications of it. And so this is the thing that we're dealing with here, because in the beginning, as a seeker or a student of meditation or a student of the truth, for a while, it's important to have compassion for yourself and understand that as much as you may want to be free because you understand the implications, you understand what's at stake, as much as you want to be free, mostly you're still in the identification with the person. And so this becomes a very sticky wicket, because one of the things that happens in this process is that people have become a spiritual personality. They become spiritual and confuse being spiritual as realizing who you actually are and being who you actually are. And so they become spiritual people and do spiritual things and go to a lot of retreats and practice meditation and read books and be in conversations about it. But it is a very sticky thing in terms of confusing that with actually realizing the reality of yourself, because the realization of the reality of yourself can only be a function of actually being that. It can't be a function of knowing about it, understanding it, acting as if it's true, right? Acting as if it's true will result in a lot of frustration and disappointment. And so it's a matter of appreciating and understanding when you are being that, the world looks different. When you are being that, you see, and in the beginning, because of your understanding about it and your understanding things like that there are no other people, that there are no separate selves. So in the beginning, through that understanding, you attempt to see things that way. You attempt to take that understanding into the way that you're being in the world, and that's a good thing. But that's still not the real deal, that's still not the real deal. There has to be enough of an establishment in the being of the reality of what we are that it actually results in seeing things differently, not behaving as if things are different, but actually seeing things differently. And so this is something that requires patience, it requires courage, it requires understanding what you're dealing with. It's the most difficult thing a human being can do. It's important to really be clear about that. It's the most difficult thing a human being can do. And as you go through the process of realizing the truth and becoming aware, there will be insidious convoluted realities that occur. The resistance will come up. The voice in your head and the personality will try and talk you out of it. In Buddhism, they have a thing called the great doubt. The great doubt. That the students of meditation and Buddhist practices who dedicate their life to waking up and to realizing the truth run into these experiences of having great doubt. I've been doing this for so long. It's understandable when you consider it. I've been doing this for so long, and it hasn't happened. Maybe I'm kidding myself. Maybe it's not something that can happen. Maybe we're all kidding ourselves here. And that's why the understandings are helpful, because when you understand conceptually that you already are this. It's happening now. Right now it's happening. You are already experiencing the reality of what you actually are. That's important to understand, so that you understand that it's a process of subtraction. I heard a guy interviewed the other day. He wrote a book called, the title of the book was Subtraction. Something like, the subtitle was like Subtraction, the Way of Realizing the Truth. And it is true, it's a subtraction, because you can't, it's not like you're going to become what you actually are. The only possibility is to stop identifying what's not real by subtraction, seeing what you're not. The biggest sticking point for humanity in terms of getting free from experiencing yourself as a separate self is the body. That's the big one, right? Because obviously people are more identified with the body than they are even with the personality. Because the idea that most people have that they're very much attached to and conditioned to believe is that when the body dies, you die, and when it was born, you were born, right? But one of the things Rupert says when he's leading these guided meditations is the only experience you have of a body is a perception and a sensation. When you look at it from a consciousness view, right? That's all that's happening in terms of what you call your body is a perception that you're having and a sensation that you're experiencing. Now, I was thinking about this. See, this is how it's important to work through these things, right? I was thinking about this and I thought, well, okay, if that's the case, right, then when you die, if you recognize that that's all the body is a perception and a sensation, and you can let go of the idea that it actually exists as a material reality, right? That would be the process, right? Through these meditations, right? But then somebody could say, well, okay, suppose we accept that that's the case, but then when I die, and I have let go of the perception and the sensation of having a body, we look around and we see that the person who's died's body is still here, and that body is cremated or buried, right? So how is it just a perception and a sensation when that body still exists? Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, to me, that's like a point of duality.
Well, it seems.
When you're no longer alive in body, but the awareness is there.
Well, it seems so, but you see what and when you look at things like this, given the understanding that you have, questions like that are useful to pursue in terms of, well, what explains this, right? And what explains this is the fact that the people in the world around you, including you, all right, are operating in the belief that material reality exists. Right? That's why after your body is gone, they're still perceiving the body that you were perceiving and sensing. If you can understand what I'm saying. It's all happening and it's an appearance. Even for people who appear to be different outside of you and are perceiving your body. That's why these things can be so convoluted and complicated, you see, because just to make the transition from the idea that there is a separate world and there is material reality. Remember in non-duality, what we're talking about here is there is no substance to what we see as reality. There's no substance to it. It's an appearance. There is no material reality. That's the big issue between scientific understanding and spiritual understanding. That in scientific understanding, it's founded to a large extent on the idea that there is a material world. But now with quantum physics, obviously, that created a big schism for physicists, because with quantum physics, the bottom line is that there isn't a material world. So now Newtonian physics and all of the ideas that are based on there being a material world go out the window. And then scientists are in a precarious position then because, okay, there is no material world, so what the hell is there? What is this that there is? And people who understand spirituality say scientists can keep breaking it down to subatomic particles and to subatomic particles, and there'll be no end to that. And it's possible to keep breaking it down, but you'll never find an end to it because there is no end to it. Because the way you're looking at it is producing what you're seeing. This is this is the issue with perception when they do, I don't know if you may be interested in this, the double slit experiment. Have you ever heard of it? Well, you should check it out. You would find it fascinating. It's an experiment that they do that demonstrates that reality can't be what we thought it was, because in this experiment, the experiment behaves two different ways that can't be happening. It can't be the same thing. You have to look at it. But
Is that the one where they shoot a ray of
yeah,
light through two?
right, yeah.
And so in one it's a ray and in another it's a particle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for a long time, that was a mysterious thing. They had no idea how to explain that, right? And then they started to understand it's the perception of it that's changing, not what's happening. And not only is it the perception of it that's changing and not what's happening, but the perception of it is all there is, you know. So, but what does all this mean? Well, in terms of what we're talking about here, it's interesting to look at these things and study these things and realize how things fall apart when you get to a certain place in terms of your observations of things, and you try and repeat experiments that are impossible to repeat because of the instability and the inconsistency of what's going on. So, but how that relates to what we're saying here is that it really gives credence to these teachings and practices that there is no separate self, there is no subject-object, that all there is consciousness itself. And if you see things in a non-dual way and you start to operate consistent with that, things start to happen that people call miracles. Because now you're dealing with the way things actually are, right? So things start to happen that people call miracles.